There.
It's a
That
fun
looks a little-
exercise. How many different colors can Allison turn her face?
That's revolting. Okay, not that one. There, if I turn it to normal daylight, it looks fine. Okay, enough of that.
Enough of these craziness.
YouTube is live. Okay, come on. Now it just changed again. I think the two screens are changing independently. I think that's what's wrong.
Oh, I see Tesla feet over there. I didn't see those before.
Yeah.
Sawyer was down here with me until I got up and went over to the desk. And then as soon as I sat down at the desk, he just got up and went upstairs. He's like, oh, you're doing your boring show. I'm out.
I thought it was going to be fun, huh?
He's happy to sit next to me on the couch while I'm prepping. But as soon as I'm over here, he's bored. He's out of here.
Should say $15. What do they do with $15?
What are you talking about?
Sorry, I'm just trying to decide which video card to get. I have to get a 1060 because the 1070 is too pricey for me.
How much is the 1070 these days?
It's 400, around 400. You can get it about $390 if you look.
Well, and then what's the price difference on the 1060 then?
Well, 1060 is around 200, 250.
Yeah, it's $100 swing or more.
Oh no, I'm just looking between two variations of the 1060. Do I get the overclock version for extra $15 with a higher memory clock speed and process GPU speed?
Yes. Yes, you do. Get it all, Roger. Get it all.
Sounds like a Pokemon game.
You gotta buy them all the video cards.
Man, that's like a.
There are some people like that.
There are, and they are either very wealthy or eating ramen every night.
Or both.
It's true. What was the one royal that used to eat a lot of TV dinners?
Oh,
he was
what one was that?
Remember, he was pretty famous for being very spendthrift.
That's how you stay rich.
That's how you save the monies, by not spending it.
You can't have money you don't have. How's that for a saying?
You gotta. I mean, it goes right up there with you got to spend money to make money.
But then you hit a point where no matter how hard you work, you don't make more money because of taxes, and you lose all interest.
Well, no, that's the whole point. Is that the whole thing with progressive tax rates, right? Yeah. Is that you encourage people up to a point, except unless you strike it rich or something, and then you try to like hold on to all of it. But I mean, really, some people just enjoy doing some aspects that you think of. Well, why do you need so much money, whatever? But they actually just like doing that style of work. And I'm sure they could do it for a nonprofit.
We talk about this a lot when we watch Star Trek. Is like, what's your motivation?
Yeah.
I think I'll go, beam down to that planet on the transporter that isn't actually working right now.
Have your atoms scattered. Well, the thing I never understood is they have all these occupations in the Federation. Surely there must be a deficit somewhere where people just don't find the job rewarding, but it needs to be done, kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, how do you get custodians, like, to clean up on the space?
Well,
you're sitting on this. You're sitting in this amazing starship, and your only job is to really just sweep the floors.
Maybe you find the clean floor really pleasing.
There's jobs that we kind of suffer through because we know it leads to better things, or ideally to better things.
My favorite was, what was the, I forget which, was it James Worthy, I think, was on one episode of Star Trek, and the captain at the end just gives him a shuttlecraft. And I'm just picturing his expenses that month going, I gave away a shuttlecraft to this guy.
Yeah. Just keep it. It's paid for.
It's like, how expensive is that? Like, they never really talk money, but it sounds expensive because
it's just replicate all the parts. It's not that expensive.
As
long as you have dilithium crystals.
You got everything. That's all you need.
Dilithium crystals aren't a power source, though.
They are the source of the engine, which then powers everything.
There's a matter-antimatter reaction that goes through the dilithium crystals, which focuses the reaction.
Oh, I guess you need antimatter too. You're right.
And then
you need both the crystals and the antimatter.
But the replicators you need to have that inert material floating around. You just can't make it.
Yeah, but you can have any inert material. I don't think that mattered.
I think I don't know. According to the guide, they needed specific stuff for the food. Like, you just can't just take a rock.
Well, you had to have a certain amount of elements. You're right.
Yes.
Like carbon. You could not have carbon. 9to5Mac and The Verge reporting that Apple is adopting the Ultra accessory connector, which is what you usually see on cameras, but they're not going to implement it as a port. So if you see this, don't get scared. It's meant to allow companies who make accessories, particularly headphones, to be compatible with both Lightning and USB-C.
Oh, that's good though. Did you just add that?
No.
You just read that?
It's a little too complicated. I just saw it just a second.
That sounds
very interesting.
Yeah. Ultra. All right, we ready?
All right.
We're ready.
It's disappearing.
Here we go. Daily Tech News Show is powered by you, the audience. To find out more, head to dailytechnewsshow.com/support. This is the Daily Tech News for Monday, February 6th, 2017. I'm Tom Merritt. Joining me today, my co-host Allison Sheridan is back. How's it going, Allison?
It is going great in this cold and wet and rainy. Cold being defined as 57 degrees, so I got a fire going here.
Cold by California standards, not by anywhere else north of us standards, or even some places south of us. Yeah, it's unusually rainy here in Los Angeles. So Allison and I are sort of dealing with the weird phenomenon of water droplets falling from the sky. But
Lots of them.
We also have a phenomenon of the FCC just tearing up all of its regulations as we have an administration change. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit as well. Just a note here, South Korea's government issued its own findings on the Note 7, agreeing with Samsung on the cause. So no controversy there. They say, yeah, Samsung's independent investigation found the same thing that ours did. And South Korea announced more frequent inspections and safety tests for battery manufacturers. Not a big surprise there either. Now, here are some more top stories. NASA aircraft engineer Mark Moore published a white paper back in 2010 about electric aircraft that could take off and land like helicopters, but be smaller and quieter. It's another page in the long storied research into vertical takeoff and landing vehicles, or VTOL. That goes all the way back to the Ryan X-13 Vertijet back in 1957. The technology itself is not new, but perfecting it has been elusive. Moore's research, however, caught the eye of Google co-founder Larry Page, and he started and financed Z-Aero and Kitty Hawk, two different companies developing VTOL technology. Now, the reason I went through all that setup is that Mark Moore has now left his 30-year job at NASA to become director of engineering for aviation at Uber. He'll work on the flying car project called Uber Elevate. If you don't remember, Uber announced that back in October. Back then, Uber said it didn't want to actually build VTOLs, but work to make it possible to do so. So there's all of the practical problems, the cost of parts, the governmental regulations that all need to be worked through. And Mr. Moore, Mark Moore, will work with manufacturers and other stakeholders to explore use cases as part of the Uber Elevate project. So a lot going on here, Allison, but if I could sum it up, really, really smart engineer who's made some great progress on VTOL aircraft, helping Uber figure out how to bring the world flying cars.
Well, I think this has so many fun pieces to it. So VTOL, like you said, started a long time ago. And my memories of VTOL were always with like the Harrier AV-8B was the Royal Air Force had them. And these were jets that had a single thruster in the center, and now they eventually separated out into four thrusters, but they were very close to the center of the fuselage, and so they flipped upside down a lot. They were really unstable, so it was like the manly men would fly the Harrier because you had a 30% chance or whatever of dying. But now that they've started to do it more in propeller-based systems like the Osprey, we see them down in San Diego all the time out of Camp Pendleton. They use two propellers really far apart. So if you think about if you were to walk on a tightrope, for example, would you rather do it with your arms really far apart or would you like them close to your body? Well, you'd fall over if they were close to your body.
I'm going to fall over either way, but if I had to choose, I want them.
You'd still have your arms out as you fell over.
Yeah, totally.
But this is a long way of saying that with the advancements that they've come into those, now you can say, okay, maybe this could become a practical use for a self-driving car because we figured out how to do it, like with quadcopters, right? We've got 4 propellers far apart that are providing the thrust. So they're not as terrifying as they are in my memories of the way they used to be. I like all the pieces of who's in this, NASA, and they got Uber, all these people working on this stuff. This is crazy.
And the other thing about this is, don't forget, we talked not too long ago about Uber contracting with Daimler to bring autonomous Mercedes to the Uber fleet, but not necessarily using the Uber technology, the Uber self-driving technology. And a lot of folks are still confused why they would do that. But this is another example of Uber saying, we don't really need to make things. We want to be the platform. We want to be the operating system. We want to help people pay to get from one place to another. So we're going to do what needs to be done to encourage this system to happen. Because back in October, what Uber described was a system where you would have particular places where you could get the flying cars, and you'd have to take an Uber to get to them. So there was a transfer involved. But as long as Uber's making money off of each part of those journeys, they don't care who makes the things. They just want the technology to exist and for it to be affordable enough to be used.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to go, to keep enabling these technologies around where you want to be able to make money. This one's kind of a little on the moonshot side, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like it to me. Lifetime? But they're saying 1 to 3 years they should have this technology workable. So,
and 48 years after that, the FAA will agree to it, right?
Right, exactly. I mean, that seems really aggressive. But getting the FAA approval and all of that, that is part of what Uber wants Uber Elevate to do. They want to say, like, let's get some smart people talking to the government. How do we expedite this? How do we make it safe? How do we make it work?
Yeah, in a country where we're not allowed to have self-driving cars, I don't want to be pessimistic. But unlike my viewpoints on VR, I think this will actually go somewhere someday.
And actually, autonomous car regulations have proceeded much more progressively than the, say, quadcopters, your UAV regulations. So, yeah, when you get the FAA involved, things do tend to take a little longer.
Yeah. All right. Well, in preparation for France's presidential election on April 23rd, First Draft News is launching a collaborative fact-checking effort called Crosscheck on February 27th. Google News Lab is a founding partner providing training and tools like Google Trends. In addition, 17 media organizations are also involved, and Facebook will provide some dedicated tools for monitoring social content and help explain the verification process while promoting Crosscheck to its users. Users of Crosscheck can submit stories for review and ask questions.
Yeah, so this is an interesting thing. Facebook also doing what it did here in the United States, where it's launched its own verification program where they'll put badges where you can link out to different fact-checking organizations, just French fact-checking organizations in this case. But I like this idea that there is a cross-platform effort saying, let's get everybody on board to help folks understand the news. And they've got 17 media organizations, including the big French newspapers and even places like BuzzFeed are involved.
Yeah. Would you say that this is a nice smaller test case of this concept?
It's not even that small.
Well, yeah, I'm being a little facetious there,
but yeah, I mean, this is honestly, it's the second test case, right? The first was the United States election in November, and a lot of people discovered things that they want to implement now. And so this is the next chance to go, okay, taking what we learned on the ground, on the fly in that election, where we have an election with some extreme parties. I know people are probably not necessarily following the French election if they're not French, but you have one of the main candidates under an investigation for ethics problems, which is boosting two independent candidates, one of a nationalist, a National Front candidate, the other sort of an independent right-leaning candidate. And those two candidates are right now thought to be the most likely to make it into the second round. They have 2 rounds of elections. So there is a lot of hard campaigning going on in this election. And the only reason I mention all of that is it makes it more difficult and more challenging for these newspapers and these news organizations to keep track of all of the different messages and verify sources and all of that sort of thing.
Yeah, what I love about what you're describing is I know about this because I listened to the Phileas Club with Patrick Beja, where he's been explaining what's going on in their political environment. And it has been really interesting to learn how could these things from Brexit and then from the United States election, now what do you do going forward to try to help things to stabilize into where we know what we're reading? And I hope this works.
I do too, because I really like the idea of independent consortiums that include the firepower of Google and Facebook, versus a lot of the rhetoric in January was about get Facebook to fix things, and to me that's putting too much responsibility and too much power in one company's hands.
Yeah, there's already too much power in that company's hands.
Yeah. JP Morgan Chase Institute, which is the research arm of JP Morgan Chase, released details of a study into the gig economy. So jobs like Uber and Lyft and services like Airbnb. What they found is monthly earnings on what they call labor platforms. That's your ride-hailing platforms, your Ubers, your Lyfts. That monthly earnings on labor platforms peaked in 2014, in June 2014, to be specific. The share of U.S. adults participating in what JP Morgan Chase calls capital sharing services, so your Airbnbs, declined from the previous year. Retention is also bad. 52% of people working on labor platforms quit within a year, and 56% of those who participated in capital platforms like Airbnb left within 12 months. One reason for these declines may be that 6 years of job growth in the U.S. has finally caused fewer people to need to use Uber or Lyft or even Airbnb to fill the gap between jobs.
I was fascinated by this. I mean, 2.5 years ago, that's when that peaked. Now, that would also include things like those little services, TaskRabbit, people who bring you food, any of those kinds of apps that are going on. And those, I thought those were on a high growth curve. But Steve and I have done an incredibly scientific study in that every time we get into an Uber or a Lyft, we ask the driver, how long have you been driving? And I don't think we've heard the word year yet. Maybe
really?
Once.
Not even a year. Wow.
Yeah, it's almost always something 4 months, 3 months, 6 months. I think we heard an 8 once. But they always go, oh yeah, I love it. It's amazing. It's so good. And they're specific about it. They don't say, I love it because like I make a pile of money. It'll be, I like it because I work on my own time. I used to drive a taxi and I wasn't making enough money. I'm making way more money driving this way. You know, all these different reasons. And yet we never hear long-term.
Yeah. And there's a growing division between the kind of people that do this too. There are the people who are employed somewhere else and maybe just need extra income, or it's not a full-time job. Those people are more likely to drop out than the people who only work on these kinds of things. People who say, all I do is Uber, Lyft, TaskRabbit, I combine them all together. When you count just people whose only work is in online labor platforms, only 37% drop out within 12 months. So it does fall quite a bit.
Doesn't that surprise you, though, that it peaked in 2014, in June of 2014? That's 2.5 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, if JP Morgan Chase is right and it's the continued pace of job creation, it would make sense that you'd have this sort of lagging indicator of people trying to fill the gap, and then realizing, oh, you know what, I think I could get by on this one job, or I finally found this one job. I trust that it's going to stick around, so I'm going to rely on that, and I don't need to supplement my income anymore. It would be halfway through that period at this point that you see the peak and the trough. So it could be a good thing. Also, the other thing to keep in mind is that Uber and Lyft have been cutting the rates that they pay drivers. So that is going to have a big effect on this as well.
Yeah, I've been thinking all along that we were talking about the number of people peaked doing the job, but that's not what it says. It says the monthly earnings have dropped. Yeah. And Uber was paying a lot of money early on and then cut it significantly, right?
Yeah, no, they did. And if this works, if this whole thing works, the way it should work is if the number of riders, the number of drivers out there falls below a certain point, the amount Uber charges will have to go up to encourage more drivers. And if they don't get enough drivers, the amount that they pay their drivers is going to have to go up. So, you know, theoretically, this works itself out to a nice equilibrium between the number of rides that we as riders need and the number of drivers who are willing to drive at a particular rate.
Yeah. So anybody who's going to go for a job at Uber or Lyft and thinks that's a long-term career path is not reading the news anyway. So maybe people are going, okay, I'm just going to do this, but I can tell this is not the cart I want to hook myself to indefinitely because of the self-driving cars.
DJ Sakani, who drives for a living, both professionally and with these ride-hailing companies, he hasn't been writing his column as much recently, but he did a great job when he was doing it all the time of giving you the driver's perspective and the fact that most of them don't think that they're making enough money. That is definitely the perception among the drivers.
Yeah, I did only find one person who said that, it was financially a great deal for them. Actually, there was one guy who he and his dad bought a car together and they share the car, and like he drives it on the weekends and his dad drives it during the week, and he'll drive it at night. His dad drives it during the day. So they're getting really, really high value out of that car. They're getting a lot of money out of it. So
clever.
Yeah. All right, well, 300 Intel Shooting Star quadcopters were used to create the U.S. flag shown during the halftime show of the Super Bowl in Houston on Sunday. The quadcopters measure 1 foot across and they only weigh 8 ounces. Each unit has an LED that can produce 4 billion color combinations and is coordinated by a central computer. The quadcopters did not fly live. We had a question about that. Anyway, they did not fly live during halftime because of FAA restrictions during the game, but a recorded video was shown on the TV broadcast and on the stadium screens. That was cool.
No, it was cool. It was cool looking, and I wasn't paying that close attention. I didn't have my critical eyes on, but I didn't think, those aren't actually happening right now. So the editing was also very good.
Well, I think it was when I almost said Madonna, when Lady Gaga leaped off the thing and into the middle. I would say everybody was texting back and forth going, was that real time? Did that actually just happen? I don't know whether she jumped into the middle or not.
That is a good question now, too.
She was singing during that part.
Did, right?
Yeah, but she was singing during the middle of that piece. Maybe she jumped, but the singing beforehand wasn't real time.
Those are other things we'll have to look into. But I wondered about that when we saw the quadcopters, and everybody had been talking about the quadcopters, and I said, well, wait a minute, isn't there a no-fly restriction over the Super Bowl? Like they made a big deal out of that.
Security would be a fairly high thing.
This explains it. They did it in the off time. And how cool would that have been to be out there and see this in operation when the Super Bowl wasn't happening? You just happened to be in the neighborhood and watch it getting filmed.
Definitely.
But all credit to Intel. This isn't even the biggest one they've done. They've done up to 500 of these quadcopters at once, all controlled by a computer. And it's the same principle behind your monitor, right? Like each of these things is just a pixel.
They're LEDs, yeah. Well, I like the Engadget article that you posted to where there's a little embedded video there where they explain how this was done. And they said this is controlled by only 2 people. And the only reason it's 2 is because you got to have a backup person. So the programming on this, and it's got to make you think a little bit, though, about Black Mirror and the episode with the bees.
Yes, definitely. Getting smaller and smaller. U.S. Magistrate Judge Thomas Reuter in Philadelphia ruled Friday that Google must comply with an FBI search warrant seeking data stored on servers outside the United States. Judge Reuter ruled that users had no privacy interest in data during retrieval, but only when the data was disclosed. What he said is you don't have a possessory interest in your data until it is surfaced. So essentially, he's saying Google can't decline to transfer the data to the U.S. in order to make it available to the FBI. And your privacy interest only comes into play once it's made available to the FBI. And the FBI has a legal search warrant in the United States. And therefore, since the revelation happens in the United States, it's covered by the warrant. Now, this decision conflicts with a second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals decision in New York last year, stating that a U.S. warrant should not apply to data stored by Microsoft in Ireland. Both cases involved warrants issued under the Stored Communications Act of 1986. The one thing everyone can agree on is that act needs to be updated because it really is meant for telecommunications, for telephone exchanges, and applying it to data more and more causes these questions to rise up like, well, wait, how do you treat data when it's stored? This isn't somebody having a phone call where one person's in France and the other person's in the US. You have data stored all over the place. The other difference between the Microsoft case and this one, all of the data in question in the Microsoft case was stored in Ireland. And so that was part of the judge's decision was like, hey, it's all in Ireland. There's none of it here. So you have to go through Ireland. In this case, Google was saying, we break up data and it's available on various servers. We've tried to figure out what data the FBI wants that happens to be on US servers and give it to them, and then not the data that's elsewhere. And the judge is saying, let's just make it simple. If the account is in the United States, you pull all the data into the United States, and then you can hand it over because you've moved it into the United States, and it doesn't violate a privacy interest when you're moving data around any more than it is when you move data around just to optimize your data center performance.
So let me back you up to what was actually ruled on here, because I still keep getting confused. Let's say I'm in Ireland and I'm using a Google service. Is this saying that until I ask for it, it doesn't necessarily exist in Ireland? So until I hit refresh on my email, that data is not mine because I haven't asked for it yet, and therefore, if it were sitting on another server in another country, U.S. or otherwise, then they could show it to the FBI.
So not really. It really doesn't have anything to do with you as a user. What he's saying is that
users had not privacy interest in data during retrieval.
Yeah, I'm going to try to find the actual wording that he said.
Okay.
Though the retrieval of the electronic data by Google from its multiple data centers abroad has the potential for an invasion of privacy, the actual infringement of privacy occurs at the time of disclosure in the United States. So what he's saying is, what happens between the user and the data at any other time doesn't matter. What happens when Google transfers data because the FBI said we need data from this account, and Google says, well, some of it's here in the US, but some of it's over there in Ireland, doesn't matter. What the judge is saying is all that matters is once you actually hand that data over, once you've surfaced the data off the servers and give it, that's when the privacy concerns come in. And at that point, since you're handing it over in the United States, US law applies to it.
Oh, come on. Okay, I don't like this one at all.
Yeah, he says there was no meaningful interference with the account holder's possessory interest in the data sought. Now, this is, like I said, this is a fraud case. It probably involves people in the United States. It might be different if it involved someone who was overseas. I think what this judge is saying makes sense from a certain point of view, which is like, hey, look, the person's here in the U.S. You've got a distributed, server system. So let's just look at what happens when the data is called up. And if the guy is sitting at his computer and calls it up, it all comes up in the US. So all the FBI is asking is for the same thing. Show us what the guy would see when he called up his data. And that's where I'm going to rule on whether there's a privacy violation. And since the FBI has a warrant for a US person in the United States, it doesn't matter where the data was before that.
Okay. But it might be a different answer. The judge's ruling could have been different if that person had been in Ireland.
Well, I'm just guessing that, right? That's not actually ruled upon here.
Okay.
Basically what he's saying is it only matters where the data is when it's revealed. So potentially you could get the data from a foreigner anyway, because they don't have the same rights as in the US. But the big thing that Google's going to appeal on is, look, we think that moving data from overseas into the United States is meaningful, that there is meaning to that transaction on its own. And whether that would happen naturally or not shouldn't matter. We shouldn't be required to pull data in because there is a precedent to say, well, okay, in this case, it was only a couple blocks of data to complete the thing that the FBI wanted. Sure, that makes sense. But what if when it's not? What if when all of the data is on a foreign server?
Right.
Then are you allowed to just go into that country's servers and pull the data off? I think that's what this case is going to be about. And that's why Google's going to appeal it.
I hope so. All right. Well, IDC's 2016 smartphone shipment estimates show Oppo rose 122.2% to become the #1 smartphone shipper in China, the world's largest smartphone market. Huawei held on to the #2 spot, followed by Vivo. China's BBK owns Oppo and Vivo, thus grabbing a third of the Chinese market. Apple's market share fell 23.2% to -- and last year's leader, Xiaomi, fell 36% to 5th place. So this market's pretty, of course you had to. This market is pretty volatile. I mean, that must mean that doesn't it?
Well, you're looking at 1 year. I don't think it's normally very volatile. Xiaomi has been on top of this heap for a while. This is a big deal, though, that Xiaomi has dropped from a 40.3%, from a 15.1% market share in 2015 to an 8.9% market share. From top of the heap.
Volatile.
Yeah. Well, it's volatile for Xiaomi.
And for Apple?
To rule on volatility, you would have to look at 15 years and say, is it always up and down? Is everybody always bouncing around? And the fact of the matter is it hasn't really. Xiaomi's been pretty stable at the top. Huawei has been very stable at number 2. Apple, I think, it's a big fall of 23.2%. And there are a lot of questions why it went from 58.4 million shipment volume down to 44.9. But Xiaomi's more explainable than Apple, and everything else looks about right. Xiaomi is getting its lunch eaten because it went with direct sales for years, and that's what helped it build its brand. But now Oppo and Vivo are coming in and selling in retail channels, and they're beating it up. So Xiaomi has to react to that. Apple may be just finding out that its novelty effect is wearing off, and I read some analysts say when Apple comes out with a significantly different phone, it will start to do better in China again. Huawei is the stable one here.
Interesting. I guess you're right, looking at a single data point here, but it feels like the sales might be expanding rapidly enough that watching the daily winner is a volatile thing to do.
Well, look at the total shipment volume, though. You only went from 429.9 to 467.3. So the overall market isn't really going crazy in its growth. It's only 8.7% growth. It's the decline of Apple and Xiaomi and the rocketing up of Vivo and Oppo that's happening here. It's a shift in who's buying what.
Yeah. I mean, did Oppo and Vivo come out with crazy new phones, or is it just the fact that they went through the retail channels that we know?
Yeah, they came out with some better phones too. They upped their game. I think that's definitely part of it. Oppo particularly has some really nice models, and Xiaomi's phones, in some ways, actually, maybe Xiaomi and Apple are having the same story. Xiaomi's recent phones have not been as revolutionary. A lot of people have looked at them and say, Mi 4 looks kind of like the Mi 3. I don't really see the big difference there. So maybe that's what needs to happen. Both of them need to come up with something that catches people's eyes. And meanwhile, if they don't, people are going to turn to a much more affordable solution with Oppo and Vivo.
There we go.
Well, to get all the tech headlines each day in less than 10 minutes, you can subscribe to dailytechheadlines.com. Go check it out. All right. US FCC sent letters to T-Mobile, AT&T, Verizon, and Comcast Friday, saying the agency has dropped its inquiries into zero rating. Zero rating is a way that content providers can provide services that don't count against your data cap. So the most famous one here in the United States right now is T-Mobile's Binge On. Anybody who can get into T-Mobile's program and they don't have to pay to be part of it can say our service, usually a video service, sometimes music services, won't count against your data cap. Of course, T-Mobile also only has unlimited data plans now too, so it's very few of their products that even need this. AT&T and Verizon have two different plans. Verizon's is called free base data, and essentially that says if you want to pay us, we won't count your services data against our customer's plan. And they use that for their own Go 90 plan. And as far as we know, that's the only major client they have for it, is their own Go 90 video service doesn't count against your data cap. AT&T has two of them. Previously, under Tom Wheeler, the FCC had found that Verizon and AT&T sponsored data plans were likely to be violating the open internet order by being anti-competitive, because AT&T sponsored data, like Verizon's, is available pretty much just for DirecTV and DirecTV Now, their own product. However, AT&T Data Perks was a different one. AT&T Data Perks was one where you could access advertisements, and to access the advertisements, they didn't count against your data plan. And the FCC had found previously that that one didn't seem to violate things.
So they're now saying that they're just, you know what, that was cute. That was a big problem. That's what the last guy thought, but we don't really care about this anymore. We're not going to investigate this. We just don't see any reason to deal with it.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a dance for Chairman Pai. Under Tom Wheeler, the Open Internet Guidelines said that zero rating was not a violation, but that the FCC would consider complaints on a case-by-case basis. So in December, and I think in November, they started sending out letters saying, please tell us about your plan. And then on January 11th, when Chairman Wheeler was still in charge of the FCC, they put out a report that set a standard for evaluating these kinds of programs that said you need to consider consumer welfare, the effects on competition, whether there's discriminatory conduct, if companies are preferring their own services, the impact of data caps, the ability to opt in or out, and the information about the plan. And that's when they said, we think AT&T sponsored data, the one that DirecTV uses, and Verizon's freebie data, which is the one that Go90 uses, are providing significant risk to consumers and competition. However, they didn't go as far as to order them to be suspended. So what's happening here is Chairman Pai is saying, we're not going to continue this investigation. We don't think there was anything wrong. Any statements made before have no legal impact. And here's Chairman Pai's quote, these free data plans have proven to be popular among consumers, particularly low-income Americans, and have enhanced competition in the wireless market. Going forward, the Federal Communications Commission will not focus on denying Americans free data. Instead, we will concentrate on expanding broadband deployment and encouraging innovative service offerings.
So it's interesting, and I don't know whether this is wrong or right, but it's interesting to look at it as being fostering competition. Certainly what T-Mobile has done has fostered competition, right? People are switching to T-Mobile like crazy because they're going to get this free stuff. They get this unlimited data plans. They get to watch their Netflix for free. So you would agree with that. But if you look at the services being offered for free, with the exception of T-Mobile, where anybody who wants to have their video service part of that free video streaming can do that. If you look at anything else, if I invent the greatest new technology of video streaming, I'm not going to be on AT&T's and I'm not going to be on Verizon's. So I am not able to compete freely in that environment with the big guys that are already there, correct?
Well, without paying, right? I mean, yes, you can compete freely. You absolutely can compete freely. All you have to do is pay the amount.
That's not freely.
Well, your competition is free. I mean, that's like saying I can't compete freely because I have to pay rent, right? In a certain respect, it's like, hey, that's the cost of doing business. Verizon charges you to reach their consumers. So to me, the issue should be, are they actually charging an amount that is meant to just provide a service? Or are they charging an amount that is meant to prevent you from competing with their own service? And Chairman Wheeler, in his report, said it seems on first investigation that the amount AT&T and Verizon charge is usurious, that it's out of hand, it's well beyond the cost of the service, and that they don't seem to charge themselves that much to put their own services on, and this is anti-competitive. The way I look at it, though, is if this becomes a problem, is there enough competition where you as a consumer can say, wow, yeah, I don't want to use Verizon or AT&T because I can't get these other services that are cool because they're trying to push me to use their own service. I'm going to go to another competitor. With wireless service in the United States, we're kind of right on that gray line. Like, well, we have 4 nationwide competitors. We have several regional competitors as well, Metro PCS, US Cellular, et cetera. So arguably there's enough competition, but it's not so vast that it's a slam dunk to say there is, especially when you consider that T-Mobile and Sprint don't have the coverage that Verizon and AT&T have.
Right. Well, that's an interesting take on it. I've always wondered why you weren't as up in arms as I thought you would be about zero rating. Well, because it does feel like it'd be hard for the newcomer to get into it.
What I don't like about zero rating is it makes the sort of permissionless innovation of the internet harder. If everybody is doing zero rating and everybody who wants to launch a new video service on the internet has to pay to get access to consumers, suddenly we're trending back towards cable television. I think that's a horrible idea. The solution to that problem is what's what's under debate here. And
whether it's government regulation.
What Chairman Wheeler said was, we should look at it very carefully, case by case, and where we find that it's being used in an anti-competitive measure, we should stop it. That sounds reasonable. It's a lot harder to put into practice than it sounds, but he was making an effort to do that. What Chairman Pai is saying is, hey, you know what? If companies want to try this to charge, then we should let them. I would be okay with that if they didn't have any government included advantages in their marketplace. Most of these companies have received government subsidies or government permissions to be able to roll out their networks easily. Can I easily go create a competitive wireless ISP? Not as easy as it should be. So let's work on that. And actually, the one thing that heartens me is that he does say we will concentrate on expanding broadband deployment. Now, if he means providing ways for the existing companies to keep expanding, that's not as exciting to me as saying providing ways for more competitors to enter the market so that we have a vibrant marketplace and companies won't want to do things that are abusive to their consumers and make it harder to use the internet and innovate on the internet because they know consumers will go somewhere else.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't the previous administration provide a lot of funding for these companies to roll out more broadband internet? And I don't remember it going through the roof and getting crazy available.
Well, I mean, yes and no. There was a little bit of money given to expand broadband. It really didn't go very far, and it was given a lot to incumbents in a lot of cases. Right,
so, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
That sort of felt like when in California we had a vote of whether or not to have the have gambling be allowed, and the way they sold it was they said all of the money, all of the taxes on this is all going to go to the schools. But what the state government did was said, okay, well, now that we have all this money for the state schools from the gambling, we can take the money we were spending and do something else with it.
Right.
So
all the money went to schools, but it didn't increase the amount of money going to schools because they took the other money away. Yeah.
So that feels like what these guys did was they said, okay, now we have this money to build out infrastructure. We'll take our money to go build, this.
And here's the other thing, and W. Scott S. One asked this very pertinent question in the chat room. He said, I don't understand why AT&T and Verizon, or T-Mobile for that matter, feel the need to exclude apps from data caps. Kind of makes the whole argument that data caps are for congestion invalid. And I answered it in the chat room. It's like, because it is invalid. They don't have data caps to help with congestion. In wireless data, there are some arguments that it has a mild effect to help congestion, especially on certain nodes where things are busy. In wired internet, it's almost entirely absent. But in both cases, data caps are not the most effective way to combat congestion. It just doesn't work. Data caps are a way to charge you money. And so zero rating is a way to make it even more complex for you to figure out what you're paying for. And in that case, I also do not like zero rating. The way T-Mobile does it is less complicated for you as a consumer because it's not making anybody pay. And in fact, unlimited data is the best thing for consumers because you don't have to think about it at all and nobody's picking winners or losers.
Right.
And honestly, that's why I want more competition, and that's why I'm glad T-Mobile did not get purchased by AT&T, because what they have done is they've gone out and they have aggressively marketed these consumer-friendly plans. They're not perfect, but they have really pushed more of the plans to take on things like, okay, let's not subsidize all the purchases. Let's come up with more consumer-friendly ways of acquiring devices, and it has pushed AT&T and Verizon to creatively come up with ways of unlimited data. For instance, if you're a DirecTV subscriber, you can get unlimited data from AT&T now. They haven't quite made the jump all the way to unlimited data, but that's what competition should do, is make it so that zero rating doesn't even matter, because this kind of bunk way of charging you for data that is unlimited, really, in practice, doesn't do anything to help manage the networks and is just a different way of trying to charge you more money.
In yet another completely scientific, large sample set database way of explaining this, I've noticed that AT&T in particular has become more interesting from a competitive standpoint. I called them up when I wanted to get rid of my Verizon MiFi because they were charging me for every month and I wanted a different kind of plan and they didn't have anything I wanted. And so I called up AT&T and said, hey, do you guys have anything that could compete with this? And they said, no, but hey, while we're here, would you like more data just on your plan? It's like,
nice.
What? And I had 5 gig and they said, yeah, you want 8 gig instead? And I said, for how much money? And they said, for nothing. And I said, for nothing, for how long? And they said, forever. Is that fattening? What's the catch? There's a catch here. And they said, nope. And you get a rollover too. And we haven't run out of data ever since, and I don't need a MiFi anymore.
Yeah.
It was, and I mean, that is my whole sample set of one, but I don't think that would have happened 5 years ago.
And Big Jim asked, do we know what the actual cost per gigabyte is to carriers? That's almost a meaningless question, because it's a modem with blinking lights. Now, there's a maximum capacity to that modem, and then there is a cost to adding more capacity to that node, perhaps. But that's not really a cost per gigabyte. It does not cost your internet provider more money for each additional megabyte or gigabyte that you download. What causes problems is simultaneous use. And that's why data caps don't actually work, because simultaneous use is the problem. If you have a 5 gigabyte cap and everybody's like, well, I just won't use the internet except at 9 o'clock, and everybody uses it at 9 o'clock, you have the same congestion problem that you did before when everybody was using the internet at 9 o'clock. So it really doesn't do much to help.
So what does make sense is like Steve's Uncle Bob lives out in the woods in Idaho, and he's got a plan where he gets so much, he's got a data cap, but if he does stuff in the middle of the night, it doesn't apply to his data cap.
Yeah, like surge, Jim's like surge pricing. Like that could be a way to actually creatively make more money and perhaps help your congestion, which is, hey, our nodes are getting blocked off. We'll give you a credit on your bill if you turn off your internet service for an hour.
Go play a board game.
Yeah.
Save $40.
Real quickly before we get out of here, on Friday, the FCC also rescinded the approval for 9 companies to provide subsidized broadband as part of what's called the Lifeline program. That program has been around forever for telecommunications, for telephone services, was changed last year to allow for broadband service as well. More than 900 companies participate in the program, though not all of them have broadband offerings. Some of them are just telephone companies. FCC Commissioner Ajit Pai says the decision was made as part of an effort to eliminate fraud and waste from the Lifeline program. All 9 of the companies had received approval within the last 2 months. So these weren't companies that have been doing this for years. They had just been approved by the previous administration, and because of regulations allowing for a 30-day overturn of things and another loophole that a couple of these others went through, the new administration is saying, hold on, let's put a pause on all of these, even the ones that were recently approved, because we think we can clean up this program and make it more efficient. Now, a lot of people are very upset about this because it is causing children and low-income families to lose their internet connection because they were getting $9.25 a month to help them pay for the internet, and now they won't be for these 9 companies. But keep in mind, it's only 9 companies out of more than 900, and you may not believe them, but this is a pause. It doesn't mean they won't give approval to these 9 companies going forward. It's a matter of whether you trust Commissioner Pai or not to do the right thing and say, okay, we've cleaned up the fraud, we've made the program more efficient. Now we can give these 9 companies their approval.
So who are the 900 companies that provide broadband? I
know, right? That is actually one of the questions I said, is like, because they don't all provide broadband. Some of them are just telephony companies.
Okay, so it's really AT&T and Verizon and Comcast and Frontier.
Yeah, and there's third-party services that do like accessibility services, TTT and stuff like that. So there's a lot of companies that aren't your typical telco involved here, but also small ISPs that provide telephony and small cable companies. When you look at the vast number of cable companies in the United States, you would think it should only be at 4 because 4 have 90% plus of the market. But there's a lot of little like single community, apartment community, small town companies out there.
Sure. Well, this is one of those ones to watch then.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks to all those who participate in our subreddit. You can submit stories and vote on them at dailytechnewsshow.reddit.com. I have a reverse pick of the day today. Paulo, who's one of the Patreons, wrote, I was wondering if you could help me. It's okay if you can't. I'm looking for some podcasts on more vertical issues like infrastructure automation, DevOps, and the cloud. Sources like This Week in Enterprise Tech or Floss Weekly do provide some information, but even those are a bit too broad for me. Do you know of any sources that are even more vertical? Now, I don't have anything.
What is DevOps?
Yeah, you need the podcast to explain that to you, right? Developer operations. So if you out there in the audience know of something that vertical? I don't, actually, off the top of my head. Give us an email, feedback@dailytechnewsshow.com, and we'll pass them along to Paulo and maybe read a few of them back out on the show. Like, he really wants super niche stuff here.
And you know what? God bless the podcasting world. There is one. You know it. I was going to say This Week in Enterprise Tech. That's what the only one I would have suggested.
Yeah, that one's pretty niche, but still, I want like single topics within This Week in Enterprise Tech. So he
sounds like Paulo should start one.
Yeah, maybe you should, Paulo. Send your picks to us, folks. feedback@dailytechnewsshow.com. Couple of other things here. Frank Celestino heard us talking about the Domino's Facebook Messenger service and came across a service app in his area called Snow Hub. He lives in Connecticut, and the snow is part of winter, although the frequency and quantity have been in steady decline over the last couple decades. The app Snow Hub is similar to Uber, but for snow removal services. Service providers, which range from full-on businesses to just individuals with a plow, list themselves on the app, and consumers find them by filling out a form. You don't have to leave your house. You don't have to go out in the cold. You send a picture of the completed job, and the payment is handled directly through the app. Frank says, I haven't used it because I live in a condo, but I will be suggesting it to my stepfather. Awesome. Zachary Dunn wrote in to clarify that progressive web apps, or PWAs, are not just a Google initiative. Microsoft has stated its intention to list PWAs in the Windows Store, and that PWAs are built so that they should still work, just maybe without all the features, even in browsers that don't specifically support PWA standards. He adds, Google is often seen taking the lead with PWAs because they are the only interested party that has both a popular mobile OS and a web browser. Microsoft is still trying to finish Edge, and Mozilla is a nonprofit. They also have the most to gain as Google makes more ad revenue from the web than native. But Microsoft and Mozilla's browser teams are very excited about these features and can be seen on GitHub and Twitter helping to steer these standards. That makes me even more excited about progressive web apps because they're literally cross-platform. And then Jesse says, when listening to Friday's episode, I always chuckle when people talk about mobile payments. I have a OnePlus 3, and at my local Food Lion, I use it a lot. The joy comes when I'm often prompted with a different language to complete the transaction. I've been offered what I assume is Chinese, French, Spanish, Russian, and about 50% of the time English. Not sure if it's my phone or the horrible point-of-sale operating system, but these devices are playing catch-up in functionality and speed of use.
That when I was looking for more information on the Harrier AV8B and the way that it takes off, I was trying to look for plans, and I found some, and all of the text was in Russian.
Yeah, I have never had any of my mobile transactions prompt me in any language other than mine. So I wonder if that's a OnePlus 3 thing that maybe should be fixed with a firmware. All right, thank you, Allison Sheridan, for being on the show. As always, where can people find more of you?
Well, you can find me at podfeet.com. On Twitter, I'm at podfeet, and I am glad that we were able to finish off and close the alliance between the SMR podcast and Podfeet and DTNS. That was the
trifecta. Yeah, the trifecta. There we go.
The axis of geek.
Thanks to everyone who supports the show, including Deepak Singh, Yuna Toivanen, Jason Russell, folks like Robert Monty and Thomas G, who just raised their pledges at patreon.com/DTNS. We do this show because you want us to do it. So if you want us to keep doing it, head to patreon.com/DTNS. Take our survey too, no matter whether you support us on Patreon or not. bit.ly/DTNS2017 is the place to go to answer a few questions to help us make the show better. Please take the survey. Our email address is feedback@dailytechnewsshow.com. We're live Monday through Friday, 4:30 p.m. Eastern at alphageekradio.com and diamondclub.tv. And our website, of course, is dailytechnewsshow.com. Back tomorrow with Patrick Beja. Talk to you then.
This show is part of the Frog Pants Network. Get more at frogpants.com.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Good show.
Boom.
What should we call it?
I learned a lot. You know what? I'm not allowed to vote on showbot.tv because I have the same IP address as Steve, I think.
Oh, and he already voted?
Yeah, and he already voted for stuff. So it's like, it says, you already voted for that.
Oh, man.
I tried turning off Wi-Fi so I'd get a different one, but the AT&T signal is so low in my house that it's not enough to load the text.
Well, maybe you just need to pay for more data.
All right, we have going gaga over drone tech.
Nice. Good Lady
Double
Gaga.
Irish email. It's a take on the whole double Irish taxation thing or non-taxation.
Uber goes vertical.
No opposition. Fly away with Uber. This week in beer money. 0 Roadblocks for 0 rating. Meet the Ubers. And when a gig isn't enough. All your drones belong to us. Is that data fattening? Uber flying. Who checks the fat checkers? Are drones better than CGI? FCC trying to. Well, I'm trying to find someone that pops and grabs me by my non-existent lapels.
Got it.
Gaga uses. Oh, that's kind of good. FCC 0 rating means 0 worries.
I do like 0 roadblocks for 0 rating.
Yeah.
Which one do you guys like?
Because I like 0 roadblocks for 0 rating, and because it doesn't imply that 0 rating is automatically good.
Yeah, it's a neutral. It's neutral on 0 rating. Doesn't say whether it's good or bad. Just says
I wouldn't go more with the topic, but I do like Uber goes vertical.
Uber goes vertical is pretty good too.
Yeah, but we already did one on flying, didn't we? On Uber's plans to.
I think back in October we did. Yeah.
Yeah, with Veronica. It wasn't vertical, but it was Uber and flying. Not going to work, but yeah, they can try.
You're so negative.
I just know how these things work. It's not going to... Let me just say, it may happen. I don't think it's going to happen in any time scale remotely.
1 to 3 years.
No, totally don't see it.
Yeah, it seems pretty aggressive.
I'm more likely to win the lottery in that time.
I bet you see one before VR is anywhere other than gaming. Like in a big way.
It's already in industrial uses. So yeah. when you mean on the
in
consumer side?
What do you mean in a big way though? Like don't flight simulators count as virtual reality?
Oh, we got in that argument before. I guess I don't.
I think you're meaning on the consumer side. Like when do people who have VR at home use them for anything besides games?
Well, no, I wasn't just thinking that. I mean, people have said, "Oh, well, VR will be amazing for doctors."
Yeah, and people are using VR for in medical situations already. They're using it for treatment too. There's a lot of psychological, like PTSD treatments using it. And there's some industrial design applications being used as well.
But you sure not AR in that case? It's because I see the AR thing where you're working on something down in a mine and you've got the glasses on that show what it should look like. But when
there's some industrial design stuff happening where you put on the hood and then you can walk around the site without actually being at the site.
Yeah.
I mean, bringing up AR though, I think AR ends up being all of it because you can do VR with AR essentially.
Yeah.
You just blank the screen out, right?
Yeah.
So I think the distinction goes away eventually, and it's all just.
It's all augmented reality. People who try VR glasses on and do the roller coaster or do walk on a tightrope and they freak out and it's really, really immersive. That yes, but what are you going to use it for other than gaming? I don't know.
Well, a roller coaster isn't gaming.
What is it?
Do you mean entertainment? Gaming? Are you just saying
entertainment? Sure. Yeah. I'll say entertainment. Yeah.
I don't think VR will be used by consumers for much beyond entertainment. I think you're absolutely right that augmented reality will.
Yeah. Maybe they put a VR helmet on you and drop you down into the middle of a war zone, like for reals, and then you have to walk in. You have to wear that right before you walk into the voting booth.
Isn't that shades of the whole Goldwater campaign back in the?
You mean the Johnson campaign?
Johnson.
What did he
against
do?
Goldwater, yeah.
Against Goldwater, because he did the whole infamous ad with the little girl picking petals off the daisy.
The countdown.
She couldn't count. First of all, she couldn't count straight. Or countdown, but then it fades away into a countdown to a nuclear detonation. It's like this November when you vote, like in a very ominous tone.
The crazy thing, Dan Carlin's most recent Hardcore History is about nuclear proliferation, and tracing it from Truman and the decision to drop the bomb into the 70s, and basically kind of going through the Khrushchev assumption of power and a lot about the JFK, Cuban Missile Crisis. But one of his points he keeps hammering is like, these bombs are all still here. Like, we've had some disarmament, but the capacity that existed in the 60s to obliterate the world still exists.
Yeah.
Didn't go away.
We went out to dinner with some friends of ours that I thought we were going to talk about all the fear, uncertainty, and doubt going on in the country right now. And the guy was super optimistic and and I was really happy because I thought it was going to be this dismal dinner and everything. And then the last thing is he gets out of the car, he goes, well, except for nuclear war, bye.
But that's always there. So, yeah.
It's an odd thing. I think it's at some point when someone develops either a larger bang or something that can take the place. I mean, it's just a big hammer. That's why people use the term nuclear option, because that's your back up against the wall and you have no other options. And it's countries like that. I mean, Britain having a nuclear capability for Britain cost them an arm and a leg.
Mm-hmm.
They used to have the ability to drop free fall bombs and ICBMs, but they dropped them because it's too expensive, and the only ones they have left are like 4 ballistic missile submarines. And they buy the missiles from us, and then the warheads are theirs. But it's just it's a big debate.
It's another reason we need space travel.
So we can blow another planet up?
No, so you can get away from all of the people with the nuclear weapons.
I would name that planet Calgon.
Take me away.
Take me away. Planet Calgon.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
It's the paradise you've always dreamt on a planet you haven't seen.
I'm joining all of my Slack.
Begin again in the off-world colonies.
Oh, it's so Blade Runner. I would really like to see what those off-world colonies look like, and I bet you they're nothing but like corrugated Kwanzaa hut.
Oh yeah, they're miserable.
Like greenhouses where people are like, breathing their adjacent ficus plant to get whatever available oxygen.
Allison, were you ever to be still capable of travel, and there was travel to Mars, would you do it?
Travel to Mars, like...
Yeah, so you're like you are right now. You're perfectly capable of boarding a ship. It's not a one-way trip. Would you do it?
Yeah, probably. Why not?
See Mars. Would you go there to live?
I don't know. What's it like there?
It's very cold and very red.
Actually, I know the answer to that. No.
Yeah.
It's because we moved from the northern part of one town to the southern part of the same town once since we've been married.
I didn't like it.
I stayed in the job same job for 35 years. I don't change anything.
You guys travel. It's not like you're homebodies. You just we're like, we like living where we live.
We're going to the Galapagos and Machu Picchu.
I know, that's exciting.
It's gonna be fun. Yeah.
Are you gonna play with the tortoise?
I hope so. From what I understand, the agenda in the Galapagos is you get up, you go snorkeling, come back, take a shower, eat, go over to the island, play around with the animals, take pictures of them, and then you go back and have cocktails.
So wait, what's the deal with the island? I mean, like, how do they get it so people aren't screwing it up? So
they don't bring in cruise ships, first of all. The biggest ships are like 100 people. We're going to go on one that's, I think, 16. So they're little catamarans that go in. It's not hordes.
It's not the Queen Mary.
Right, exactly. So that should be fun. Okay, so...
Do you have to do any science?
I hope so.
Take a
Do you
look.
have to do any science?
We need you to describe everything you see while you're here.
I'm hoping I've heard there's going to be a science march, by the way. Did you hear that?
I read something about that, but I didn't follow up to find out what it is. I find it...
If we find it.
Like, really? We have to march in support of determining that things are true?
Yes, apparently.
I know.
Apparently. Slack is acting really weird. It's not acting like a regular
Replicable
app.
results. Replicable results.
Same.
What's wrong with this? Slack is acting really weird.
What's acting weird?
Like, it's not acting like a real app. Like, I can't move the window around the Slack app.
Which one is? Slack? Oh.
The Slack app. So, like, I'm trying to say, okay, I want to add something. I can launch it, but I'm in the DTNS boss's Slack, and that's all I can do. I can't do anything else. Oh, I can hit the button to start a new conversation, but I can't. Like, I can't even slide the window around.
Oh, that's
I can't
weird.
command tab to it. And I just installed it.
Maybe
I can
it
hit
needs to be
what's
restarted.
new. I just quit it and restarted it.
I can't
And
quit
that's
you.
crap.
Quit it.
Okay.
Quit it.
All right.
Mama's Prime Bar.
Oh,
So I've
marchforscience.com.
Oh,
Thank you, another J. Martin.
marchforscience.com.
On Earth Day. Oh, okay.
Oh,
it was
that's cool.
it was Ryan Ozawa that I saw mention this earlier today. Earth Day is April 22nd. Walk out of the lab and into the streets.
I like it. That's one I can get into.
Vocalize your journal.
Will it be a double-blind march? Will we have an equal number of people not marching so we can compare as a control
Yeah,
group?
they'll be the control group.
But you have to stand on white paper. Okay, this is crap.
Why do you have Post-it notes on your feet? They're my footnotes.
Hey!
Oh, look at
Where'd
the
that
time.
come
I
from?
got to get going.
Yeah, me too.
All right. Actually, I do. I've got a friend
Yeah.
coming over for me to move her Mac from her old Mac
I
to
am
her new
almost
Mac.
published here. We had a nice meaty show, though. It was good.
Yeah, that was fun.
Thanks again,
I learned a
Allison.
lot. I noticed one problem. I'm
What's
so
the
used to
problem?
just listening to you teach me stuff. At one point, I was just going, because I'm just used to listening to
Oh,
you tell me stuff.
you're used to listening to the show. You're like,
Yeah,
oh,
and
wait,
so
I
like,
can,
oh,
I
wait,
can
I
actually.
might be.
I thought you'd be used to wanting to yell back at me so often that.
No.
All right,
I did
Zero
a,
Roadblocks for Zero Rating is the title. The show is published. We are out of here. Where's the window? Thank you, everyone, for watching or listening. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.